Everyone, I am recording and I am done talking. So I'm going to hand it over to Coach Sara.
Thank you so much, Jill. And hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Sarah Dawson, one of the coaches here at Ama La Vida. And I'm from Seattle, Washington. So I'm not going to pop that in the chat since I'm speaking right now, but would love to hear from some other folks in the meeting today and hear where are you from? That's one of the things I love about coaching with ALV and having these remote Zoom sessions is the ability to be connected all around. So awesome. We've got good variety. We've got both coasts represented and a little bit of everything in between. So greetings. This is going to be an interactive conversation. My goal for today is that you really have fun with it. So thank you already for getting going on the chat. Definitely more to come. And so with it, hopefully you're here to learn more about how to avoid burnout and to uplevel your work. And I'm curious to know now, who here has worked with Ama La Vida before? Can I get a raise of hands in terms of a yes in the chat box if you are a current or previous client with ALV? A simple yes or no would be great. I saw some names that I recognize, current clients in the chat that I'm so excited were able to join me today, and love seeing that we've got responses from folks who are working with the other coaches on our team. So with that, for those of you, also see some no's coming through who haven't heard of Ama La Vida before. Like we show on the screen here, we've got coaching in all different areas, but I'm here to talk to you today about managing burnout because as a health and wellness focused and career-based coach, my philosophy is that health is really at the foundation of everything that we do. And especially in the world that we live in today, burnout is just so much more real now more than ever. And my wish is that through our short conversation and workshop today, that we are able to identify some key stressors for you, as well as some key next steps to move you forward in managing that burnout in the same way that I so enjoy coaching my clients on in our session. So welcome. And with that, Ama La Vida is all about loving your life, whether that is personally or professionally. So I'm excited that we can find ways today to manage your burnout in that quest for that greater happiness and fulfillment. And with that, a little bit more about myself. Prior to coaching with Ama La Vida for the past 2.5+ years, the majority of my professional experience has been within the digital advertising space. So can I get a show of hands on the chat? Does anybody on today's workshop, are you from the marketing or advertising world in terms of your profession, either current or previous? Awesome. So already seeing at least one of you that has that. And so with that in mind, burnout is a very real thing, of course, across all industries, but definitely in the agency advertising world where I spent over 13 years, very big with client service background, big deadlines, lots of stressors, very reactionary. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about coaching my clients through burnout today. And for me, while I always thought advertising was interesting, I was a regional account director lead for our Seattle office's media account management practice. I was also a national business operations lead for the group. Within that role, I thought advertising was interesting, but it was truly the people that kept me there for so long that I so enjoyed the most. And that was the leadership and professional development coaching of my teams. And so with that, it was just one small sliver of what I did. And so I knew that for myself, I definitely wanted more. I was tired of the long hours. And once I made that very important recognition, that discovery, that coaching full time was the path that I wanted to go, I had a parallel path journey of balancing the full-time advertising and the part-time coaching for quite some time before I made that leap. So I was already experiencing that burnout. And then, as you can imagine, with all of those hours, that burnout was that much more real. But I had that end goal in mind. That's what kept me moving forward. And so now I'm so excited to say that it's been over a year and a half now since I made that transition to full-time coaching with Alma La Vida. I've never looked back. And again, I'm just grateful to be able to support you all with that burnout today. One other fun nugget about me is I also really enjoy Taekwondo. So several years ago, when I decided that coaching was that big next step for me, I also re-engaged with Taekwondo. That was one of my loves as a kid, and I knew that I wanted to eventually cross black belt off my bucket list. And today, as a second degree black belt and instructor, that is another key part of who I am and what I do. But how does that relate to burnout? Well, time is a big burnout factor and stress. And if you had asked me before, how are you going to manage a career transition plus this Taekwondo hobby, plus excelling within your current role, I would have told you that that was impossible. That sounds crazy. But being on the other side of that now, I so enjoy being able to walk through those steps and strategies through coaching. And so let's dive into some of those nuggets for today. So I'm going to go ahead and pause my video while I go through these slides, but I will be back at the end of our session. So for today, we're going to focus on 3 core areas. First, why burnout happens. What matters there in terms of your health and wellness and how that plays a part. And then we're going to explore how this all relates to becoming a high performer. When I say high performer, I mean performing at your best, feeling at your best, really managing that burnout so that way it's not holding you back. And from there, we're going to discover how habits play a part in that burnout. And by building better habits, we can better manage our stress. And then we're going to wrap up with some concrete next steps. I'll share more how I can help as part of that process. And then we're going to leave about 10-15 minutes at the end as well for some Q&A. But like Jill mentioned, we've got the chat box, so feel free to also chime in during our time together. I'll answer what I can throughout, and just know that we will definitely have that time at the end as well. So let's start first by talking about burnout factors. Now, so many of us today are all too familiar with this term, and it's defined as that constant state of physical and emotional stress and exhaustion. So chronic stress can lead to that burnout. And with everything that's going on in the world right now, that burnout feeling is just so much more real in 2020. And we all have our ups and downs. There can be those good days and the bad. But when you're feeling burnt out, time just has this way of continuing to go on, and it has this surreal sort of feel to it. And then you look back and realize, I feel like I don't have anything to show for it. So that is burnout in a nutshell. And I have some stats to share with you about that. So this Gallup World Poll slide is already old. This is pre-2020. But if you see where the lines are trending here, in terms of our feelings of stress, worry, and anger in the world, they are all trending in a direction that we do not like to see. And this is from a Gallup World Poll. It's taken annually. And again, this is pre-COVID, so I can only imagine how much higher these line graphs would be today. And for Americans as well, that feeling of stress is the highest it's been in over a decade, and it's a lot higher than compared with other countries around the world. And so with that, stress, it's up and down. But one of my first questions that I'd love to pull for this group is to hear from you now. If you reflect on just yesterday, and I don't know about you, but yesterday already feels like so long ago. I'd love to know if you were stressed out a lot of the day yesterday. So if you feel like you were stressed out a lot, a simple yes or no in that chat box. I asked that question because that is the question, one of them that is used in this Gallup World Poll to determine those stress levels. So of course I wish that I saw tons of no's there, but I'm seeing lots of yeses, a few no's. But with that, that's why we're here to talk strategies and some next steps. Oops, hold one moment, please. Okay, here we go. Now, another factor that contributes to our burnout and stress is this idea of a wandering mind. So as part of that burnout and stress, what I hear from a lot of my clients these days, and honestly, what I can often feel myself, is a lack of focus, this feeling of distraction, this wandering mind. And that's something that's really tough for us as humans to grapple with, because we are ultimately less happy when we aren't in the present. Studies confirm this, and unfortunately, those studies also show that our minds wander almost 50% of the time. And so if we're less happy when we are mind wandering, well, that's happening almost half of the time. And we add technology on top of that, and that creates even more challenge for us, that distraction there. So there's lots of stats out there around phone usage. Now, I had one from 2019. I'd love to get some guesses in the chat box now. And how many times do you think that we check our phones a day? Rough guess. Throw any number in the chat box. As with coaching, there's no right or wrong, although I guess there's a wrong in terms of this particular study I'm referencing. But okay, so I'm seeing a wide range, anywhere from 50, 60 to 100 plus. And so with that, November 2019, the average at that time was 96 times a day. So that's over once every 10 minutes. And I bet now, with more of the staying at home that many of us are doing, that number is just that much higher now that we're in this virtual world. But once every 10 minutes, that is a challenge. What becomes even more of a challenge is knowing that it actually takes us on average about 15 minutes to get focused on any one task. So it's no wonder then that our mind is wandering and we're feeling unfocused, because even just with phones alone, we're checking it more frequently than the time it takes to actually get fully focused on something that we are doing. So wandering mind, that also leads to that burnout. So I don't think I need to explain why burnout matters. The fact that you are all here really helps to support that. But just like those studies and stats have shown, as you've probably felt yourself, that stress and burnout is what gets in the way of our happiness. And to take action, we need to understand what causes that burnout. That's something that I really dive into first and foremost with my clients when we are first meeting and building goals and clarifying next steps. That first key part is noticing what are those factors in our own lives that are contributing to that burnout, so that way we can address those pieces that are specific to you. So once we know those areas, then we can reduce the distraction. And the good news, my philosophy and what I've seen and the data that I have to support that I'll go through with you today, is that we can control this. So I'm going to start talking about how we can. But before I do that, I'd love to pose another question in the chat box. So how much of your happiness do you think is within our realm of control? So percentage wise, do you think it's 10%, 50%, 100% of our happiness within our realm of control? What are your thoughts on that percentage? We'll wait for a few responses to come through there. Okay, so I've got a range coming through as well, anywhere from 50% plus. So love it. Looks like there's a lot of kind of optimism and feeling of control in terms of our happiness. So let's see how it pans out after I click on my slide. Okay, great. So an empowering approach to happiness. This is sourced from the book of The How of Happiness that I would recommend by Sonia Lubomirsky. I apologize for butchering her last name, I'm sure, as well as Kenan Sheldon. So The How of Happiness. One of the quotes from that book, that philosophy is that it's something that can be successfully pursued, but it's not easy. But the good news is it's doable, that we can create and sustain our own happiness in life. And so the percentage breakouts based on their beliefs and studies have shown that, well, 50% is outside of our control. That's just purely our genetics, our makeup there. 10% circumstantial. But then the great thing is that we've got this other bucket of 40% that is within our realm of control. And so it's not an exact science, but there are a lot of strategies around this. So that way, all of that burnout that we are feeling, well, let's start to uncover then how we can really maximize that 40%. Okay, so going back to that idea of noticing, as I work with my clients on burnout, again, we want to first explore their lives, their experience, and to understand then what are those factors that are contributing to your burnout. Any factor there, we can call it a distraction. It's distracting you from feeling happy, feeling how you want to feel. It's distracting you from performing your best. Or like in this slide here, we can think of it, call it like your kryptonite. So random but related question for you all. Who here has heard of the biohacker Dave Asprey? He's the one who made bulletproof coffee famous. Or even if you don't know him, have you heard of that term bulletproof coffee? That's where you've got the coffee with either the MCT oil, coconut oil, butter. I had 2 cups of it this morning myself. But okay, so there's some familiarity there. And with that, Dave's model likes to call the areas of our lives that stop us, he will call it that kryptonite. So just like Superman, we need to identify and minimize our own kryptonite or our distractions. And you can see there are many different examples here, whether it be on the mental, emotional side, the physical, social. So social could be toxic relationships. The physical could be what we are putting in terms of our body, in terms of, say, processed sugar, or perhaps alcohol is a kryptonite area for you. What is kryptonite for you might not be kryptonite for somebody else. But then on the mental, emotional side, it might be your own limiting beliefs or feeling isolated. On the physical side, it might be manifestations like shallow breathing or allergies. So the list of distractions in kryptonite is endless. And so when you reflect on your life today, most recently, I'd love to hear from you all on what is one distraction area for you. So again, it doesn't have to be on this list. That list is endless. It could be endless phone scrolling. It could be news. It could be another sort of food or physical related item. Or it could be on that professional front, like the job search and security. That is absolutely a distraction area that is so relevant to so many of my clients right now, especially in this climate. So any others as you're reflecting here, just like with coaching, there's that power in that reflection, because putting it out there means you're that much more likely to take action on it. So feel free to take a few more moments now to reflect on that, whether or not you put it on the chat. But yes, thank you, Shanti. With COVID, worries about that shutdown, yeah, that's very real across the world right now as well. So we can talk about distraction, especially with how quickly things are changing in the world, really on a daily basis as it relates to COVID right now. So the distractions, they're plentiful. So let's go ahead then and explore, well, what do we do about that? We know there are all of these distractions. What is within our realm of control then, that 40%? So that way we can be more high performance, that we can feel our best, raise that bar for ourselves, and achieve whatever goals that we are looking to achieve. And thank you all for continuing to chime through in the chat. I'd say the biggest theme it looks like right now coming through is COVID. Probably no surprise there. So next I'm going to share with you the high performance formula. So this is another one that I have taken from Dave Asprey's approach because this formula really resonates with me. This explains what it takes to get there. And the great thing is this applies to any of our goals. And this really applies to coaching as well. And I'll share why. So clarity with any goal that we want to achieve, and especially with managing burnout, we need to get clear about what needs to be done and why and when and how. So anything that we want to accomplish, we got to get specific on it first. And then we also have to have energy. So think of this like our capacity, whether that be mental or physical, to do the work that we need to do. So it has to be a sustainable source of energy. We think of burnout. Burnout is oftentimes the opposite of having sustainable energy. So with my clients, I often focus on building those key sort of healthy cornerstone habits that are going to build up that energy and health. So that way you have as much of that brain power to be able to focus in on the other aspects of life. You've got to have that energy then. You also have to have that focus. So we say focus here, I mean, that's that system in place to have sustained focus and attention. So just wanting to be focused is not enough. We talked about the phone time being an issue, the wandering mind being an issue. So oftentimes I coach on different strategies to build more of that focus so that you can be more productive and motivated to move forward, which is especially hard right now. And then last, we also need to have a system. So you can get clear on your goals. You might have all of the energy in the world. You're feeling really focused about it, but you also need to have a plan in place to move forward, whether that be the right schedule, setting deadlines for yourself, knowing specifically what your action steps are and when they are happening, some sort of plan in place. And so that is another key area with my coaching clients that we are always building together, is this roadmap for what you need to happen and when in order to move forward. Because if we focus on everything overall and we don't break it down into those bite-sized pieces, well, then we're creating even more overwhelm and burnout and are not serving our cause. And then we need to subtract those distractions. So all of those pieces that we just shared before, those things that are getting in the way, we know there are a lot of distractions that are outside of our control, but we really want to then focus on those distractions within our control, those things that are holding you back. And we might not be able to remove or minimize all of the things, but the goal is to, as much as possible, minimize those so that way we can really increase your high performance potential. And so everyone's different. I have clients who have a great system in place. They have that clarity on the goal that they want to achieve. They know what they need to do, and yet they are struggling to follow through. And then when we dive into it, it's that burnout that's contributing to the low energy levels and filled with distractions. Yet I have other clients who actually have that energy. You know, they're solid on their health routines. They know what they want. They're clear on their goals, but in terms of their approach, they don't know how to get there. And for them, we would coach on the system, for example. So for you all, next question to pop in the chat, I'd love to know which parts of the high performance formula for you need your attention. It might be one, or it might be multiple. I would guess that all of us here could have some work we could do in terms of minimizing those distractions. But if any of those other parts of the formula could also use your attention right now to support you with your burnout, go ahead and throw that into the chat box, and let's see what some similarities and differences might be for us there. Okay, so we've already got some variety, whether it be all or one or multiple. And that totally makes sense. We've all got our different situations. We've all got our own different sort of direct distractions. We have our different triggers that create that burnout for us. But our next steps that we're going to explore around building better habits is going to relate regardless of which aspect of this formula is needed for you in your unique situation. So let's go ahead then and move on to building those better habits. So we've explored so far the high performance formula, what it takes to be less burnt out, to feel happier, to be able to perform our best. And now we're going to explore how building better habits fits into that. And we're going to do that by understanding first what drives our habits to be able to then help change our behaviors. So our habits, they do not define us. This is good news, because habits, they are usually repeated and unconscious, like you see here. They are those automatic behavioral patterns. So for example, quick yes or no, how many of you know how to drive a car? I'm raising my hand if you can visualize that. So if we got any yeses or nos in the chat box, do you know how to drive a car? And we've got several responses coming through. Great. Okay. So we've got some no's, we've got a lot of yeses. So whether it be a car or something else that you do on a regular basis, once you learn to drive that car, each time that you're going to go for a ride, it's not like you are having to actively think about the fact that I'm opening the car door, I am sitting in my seat, I'm taking my key, I'm putting it in the ignition, I'm turning it to the quarter turn to the right to start the engine, I'm buckling my seatbelt. Now I need to look behind me, and as I press on the pedal, I need to make sure no one's around. All of those things become automatic once they are learned. And thank goodness for that, or else we would never get anything accomplished in our day. And so those habits, that's one key part of who we are. We have so many of these automatic sort of unconscious habits throughout the day, but we also have other components of habits to keep in mind. So we've got our own biology, the environment that we're in, and our psychology, that are all of those pieces that contribute to our habits, whether it be something simple or simpler. It definitely doesn't feel simple when we first learn to drive a car, or something else in terms of habits that are or are not serving us towards the goals that we want to achieve. But it's not just like we build all these automatic habits and that's just it. We also have, as part of ourselves as human beings, these other two components, our intentional behaviors and actions, as well as our ability to be present in a given moment. So going back to that wandering mind, this is the opposite of the wandering mind. This is being present and focused, just like I ask my clients in each of our sessions that we be fully engaged in our time together, so that way we can really help best support in moving forward. So habits serve us, habits don't serve us as well. And that's definitely true with a topic like burnout. So my next question I'd love to explore with you all is, what is one habit that you would like to change? So think back to perhaps those distractions that aren't serving you, or think about perhaps a lot of habits that these repetitive sort of actions that you're taking that are contributing to burnout. And maybe it's not even contributing to burnout, but just in general, habits that you want to change. I'll say for myself, I have got a really big sweet tooth. And, one of the habits I'd love to change is that sort of stress emotional eating that definitely with 2020, that sort of nighttime emotional eating with sugary things is something that I personally would like to change, because I know for myself, when I move forward with that habit, I definitely feel it the next day. All right. And for those of you who might not be seeing what's coming through on the chat, I'm seeing some great variety here, whether it be related to that distraction that's happening on the phone, like games or checking email, or, I definitely hear this one a lot with my clients, sitting too long at the desk and computer, not taking enough breaks. Absolutely, that's one that can be a big theme with burnout. Someone else with junk foods, similar to my own, and more of the same with email and breaks. So definitely, we all have habits that we would like to change. So let's start exploring even more how we can do that. And by understanding habits, that is a key step that we can take towards making a shift in that process and feeling a little bit less burnt out. So habit loops. The idea behind a habit is that they are a loop, they are continuous. They all start like that circle at the top with some sort of a trigger. And once that trigger happens, then you have some sort of reaction, whether it be a desirable reaction or not so desirable, like my stress sugar eating. And that reaction, whether favorable or unfavorable, then leads to some sort of a consequence. And then the cycle repeats. And that repetition just further locks it in. So if it's a habit that becomes natural to us that we like, great, but it can make it that much more challenging to break when it is not serving us. And oftentimes my clients will ask me about the timing for a habit change. So when we're fleshing out our goals, especially in areas of feeling less stressed and burnt out, we get clear on how that's showing up in their lives. Commonly, the question will be around, okay, well, how long is it going to take? I'm committed, I'm ready to change. What are we looking at? And there's so much literature out there around this, where I would say best practice, that timing is 90 days or around 3 months to really make a big consequential habit change stick. But if it's a smaller habit, or really it just depends on who you are and the situation and where you're at right now. But new habits can also take as short as anywhere from like 3 weeks to make a change to those 3 months. So again, it's really customized depending on your situation, where you're at, but just recognizing that there is this loop in the process is really key for us then to explore, how do we redirect what's happening in a habit loop that's not serving you? And then we experiment and we reflect and we make adjustments and move forward, just like we do in coaching. So I've heard from a lot of you in the chat box around those habits that you would like to change. And there's this idea of redirecting your habit trigger in order to take a favorable sort of action instead. So I'll give you an example for myself with the emotional stress eating with the sugar desserts at the end. So the trigger may always be there. End of the day, I'm tired, looking at the calendar or a messy inbox. Those can be things that can trigger that stress. But rather than immediately going to the pantry for the leftover Halloween candy that's there, we want to think about redirecting that action to something else that's going to fulfill the need that it is serving. So in that example, when I reflect on it, I know that it is it's a distraction. It's de-stressing by focusing on something that I enjoy, because there's pleasure in eating something sugary and delicious like chocolate Twix, which are my favorite in the goodie bag that's in the pantry right now. But one example that I know serves me a lot better is redirecting that to something else that's going to bring me pleasure and de-stress. And for me, that big piece is Taekwondo. So I'm so grateful that with COVID, I've got my virtual classes as well. So when I'm really conscientious here about that trigger, noticing it as that first step. And then for me, instead of going into the pantry, I start practicing my Taekwondo, or even better if it happens to be right around when one of the evening classes is, and then I could just change and get ready and go from there. So in the chat box now, would love for you to think about and share what is one way that you will redirect your habit trigger. So if you're not taking enough breaks at work, what might you do instead when you notice yourself in those moments just staying hunched down and moving and not moving? Well, then what might that next step look like? So take a moment there. And I love seeing that, for one of you, boxing class is one of those sorts of relievers there. That's awesome. Ooh, I like Shanti's response of, instead of reaching for my phone, picking up a book instead. The reason I like that so much is that is a direct sort of find and replace between the trigger and the reaction that's not serving you to a different sort of reaction that serves that same purpose. That can be just a very easy sort of translatable piece. So excellent, great ideas that are coming through here. Something active, yep, that's going to be one of the strategies that I'm going to talk about shortly here to help break that habit loop. Movement, so key, so powerful about it. So yeah, finding and replacing, that's really key. And there are a lot of great books about habit out there. I would say this sort of habit loop, the idea of redirecting that trigger, that comes from a book called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. So if you'd like to learn more about this process, then that is absolutely something that I would recommend that you check out. And another one that I also really enjoy right now is by James Clear. His book is called Atomic Habits. And there are some other strategies that we're going to touch upon now, habit building strategies that I've taken from a few of those areas. All right. So before we wrap with our Q&A, there are several strategies that I'm going to walk through with you now, ways to help build those better habits. So first off, if you have a goal or an action that you want to take, then you want to make it more obvious as a next step. If there's something that you want to avoid, like for me with that sugary candy, then I want it to be not obvious. I want to have to work hard to go find it. And so some simple things to keep in mind here would be, if there are going to be these habits that are going to help manage your burnout, then explore how you can shift your environment. Let's create some physical or non-physical anchors. We call them anchors, meaning it's something that you can see. An anchor can be physical, like a Post-it note. It can be non-physical, like an alarm on your phone. And again, hiding what you want to avoid. So depending on if those habits are serving you or are not, think of the ways to make reminders in your environment work for you. So with that in mind, would love to hear in the chat box a reminder that you will plan on using depending on what your particular goals and habits would be. Just shared a few examples there, but that list was by no means all inclusive. So go ahead, feel free to type that into the chat too. The more that we put out there, the more accountability that we create. And so with my clients, there's just so much power when they're sharing with me what their next steps are, and they know that I'm going to be asking about it, for example, in our next session. And there's just that power in either sharing something out loud or putting it in the chat box. So if there is a shift in your environment that's going to resonate with you, go ahead and throw that in the chat. Awesome. I see some notes here about alarms. So whether using an alarm, so that might be using your phone to work for you, like Nikita mentioned, or it might be the opposite for Michelle, where it's actually leaving it elsewhere is going to be key. Journaling as well. That's another great strategy that commonly many of my clients enjoy that to create more intentionality. Excellent. Thank you. Let's talk about the next strategy then. So now we want to make it appealing or unappealing, whatever that sort of next step is going to be. So if your goal is around eating more delicious pie, then like this cute little, what looks like a pug here, well, great. Then we're going to keep it out in front. We're going to make it appealing. There might be some reward or incentive to eating that above and beyond itself. Or it might not be. You might have a goal around perhaps eating more vegetables, for example. And maybe if the vegetables themselves don't excite you, well, then what reward can you put in place once you do eat those vegetables? Is there something else? Maybe it's treating yourself to an activity or a book or something else. You fill in the blank with whatever resonates with you. Rewards are always key. And anytime that we can combine activities, or as James Clear would call it, habit stacking, that can be really powerful too. So if there's something that you are already doing in your day that works well for you, and let's say you want to achieve something else that's going to further help you, well, then as much as you can build upon what you are already doing, you're that much more likely to follow through. And then on the flip side of that, creating disincentives. So we as humans, we either move towards pleasure or we move away from pain. So if, for example, we have an accountability buddy, or there are apps out there that depending on what activities we do or don't do, it's set to our bank account, for example, and we lose money, that can be an example of a powerful disincentive that can motivate us to action. So a lot of different ways here to make an action or a habit appealing or unappealing. So for yourself, I'd love for you to think about how you reward yourself currently, or if you're not, what you might do to reward yourself moving forward. This is all about exploring different ideas and strategies to implement for your own flavor of burnout. We won't know exactly what's going to work or what isn't, but just like I do with my coaching clients, is we always identify those next steps, but then we revise that plan based on what is and isn't happening. Okay. So we've got 3 more strategies to share here before we start to close. So another habit consideration with a goal you want to achieve. Something you want, let's make it easier. Something you want to move away from, let's make it harder. So James Clear talks about this idea of minimizing friction. That would be making something easier. So minimizing friction could be something like you want to go for a run every morning. Let's say you're training for a marathon And what you're finding is that you wake up, you're cozy in bed, daylight savings time, it's so much darker now that just even the thought of getting up and picking your clothes out and grabbing your shoes, like that's just one other barrier. That's more friction that's going to stop you from moving forward. So instead of that, lay out your clothes the night before, put your shoes right there. That's one way to just further make it easier to move forward. One less thing to think about, so that way you can just go on autopilot with what you want. So the key here is with goals and next steps, let's make it easier on ourselves. Let's not rely only on willpower. So if we can make it easier, create barriers where there needs to be, or minimize them where it will help us, then that is really key for establishing new habits. So I'd love for you to think about now the sorts of distractions that you may need to remove if you're looking to minimize them to move forward. And as you reflect on that, we'll move on to this other idea of any habit that you want to move forward with, let's make it more enjoyable. The ones you want to avoid, let's make it less enjoyable. So we talked about that habit loop. So now we're really focused on creating a positive habit loop. So this just gives more context as to why a reward, for example, is so powerful when you have the reaction you want based on a trigger. Well, let's lock that in. Let's keep building it up in the same way that we disincentivize when there are habits that are unwanted. So really think here about the new habits you want. How are you going to make it fun? The other habits that you don't want, how are you going to make it suck more? That's essentially what we mean here. Would love for you all to think about that with your habits as it relates to supporting managing your own burnout and stress. And then last but not least, this is really my ultimate favorite strategy. Again, this is why for me, Taekwondo has been such a powerful part of my own journey. It's this idea of using our physiology. And so for many of you, I saw in the chat that one of those areas that you're looking to shift is taking more breaks, not just getting sucked into either your phone or the computer. And one of the reasons that can be so powerful, not just only for the feel good and just getting more time away from work, is the fact that emotion comes from motion. So oftentimes I'm exploring with my clients, and it's really easy to want to just always think ourselves into feeling better. And we do absolutely explore that, but we also want to explore how we can use our physiology to feel better. If we can focus on that first, then the mindset can so much easier follow after that, because our feelings and our body are interconnected. So with this in mind, knowing that how you carry your body affects how you feel, you can even do just a simple sort of test for yourself right now. I'm talking, for example, I'm sitting in my chair, but I've got my shoulders back, my head's up tall. I'm hopefully projecting my voice. I think I am. And I am using hand gestures to be expressive, versus now I have my hands on my desk and my shoulders are slumped. I'm starting to talk a little slower and my eyes are down. And already from here, if you're doing this too, just notice what this does for your own feeling. I'm not going to stay in that for long, because that is not the space that I want to be in. I want to be in that energetic, less burnt out, feeling high performance sort of space. So with that in mind, I'd love for you to challenge yourself to test this out moving forward. And you can do this by thinking about a time when you were in a peak state. We call a peak state something when you were feeling your best. So for me with Taekwondo, it's when I'm in my ready stance. It's called Chumbi, where your two hands are in tight fists in front of your hips, your shoulder width apart. And that means that you are ready to go. So what I do, oftentimes is I channel that Chumbi state even when I'm outside of Taekwondo. So I might be in a Zoom meeting and you don't see what's below the half of the screen, but that's where I'm making my Chumbi, 2 fists in front of my hips. That's one way to bring me back to that feeling of that peak state. So I encourage you to try that moving forward. All right, we're going to close in the last 30 seconds here with some commitments, and then I do want to leave some time for Q&A. So with coaching, it's all about taking these learnings and moving forward with action. So I encourage you now to reflect on one step you're going to take based on what you learned today to reduce burnout in your life, and by when. And reflect on who's going to hold you accountable and how. And know that I can support you along the way. And if it's not me, then establish for yourself, how are you going to have that support to move you forward? Because that piece is so key. So for accountability purposes, I'd love, you can take a moment, answer one of those questions in the chat as I go ahead and move forward with our next slide. If you've been to one of my webinars before and you know this already, then I'd ask you to hold off on answering in the chat. But for those of you that haven't, bringing this back about support. For me, I so enjoy supporting my clients and moving forward. As I talked about, feeling burnt out, balancing the job transition, and then also figuring out how do I fit in Taekwondo into all of that. That was not easy, but it's something that was worth it and is so enjoyable. And I'm so proud and excited to be part of this instructor team that you now see on the screen. This was taken from October of last year. And so just like I've appreciated having support along the way from my own coach, having that sort of process, I'm always here to chat. If you'd like to schedule a consult, learn more about coaching, feel free to reach out. But my question for you is, you can look in here and think of it like, where's Waldo? Take a guess as to where I am in this picture for fun. And if you have a guess, you can write it in the chat. I will answer that afterwards. But I'm going to leave you briefly on this screen. So again, we're going to answer some questions in these last few minutes here. But if we don't get to everything, feel free to follow up. You can email me, or if you're interested in learning more about coaching, we've got the website link here. Just by you attending this webinar today, we have a coupon code that's part of this deck that if you'd like to explore coaching membership support, then you can get that first session free as part of your membership. So just know you've got that code there. And with that, I heard top left, top row. I'm impressed. That is true. I'm the second from the top left. So I'm surrounded by 2 tall people. Then boop, there's me. So nice finds to Jorlansky and Nikita. And with that now, happy to wrap up with some questions. So if you have any other questions, feel free to pop that into the chat box. Jill and I are here. And as Jill mentioned in the chat, again, you can use, there's a bit.ly link there to schedule a consult as well. So thank you all for your time.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. That was great. Much needed. All right, questions. Does anyone have any specific questions for Coach Sara? I know sometimes it takes time to let all of this great information digest and settle. Exactly. But if anyone has any questions that come up later on, I know that happens often. We will be sending a recap email or a follow-up email after that'll include the recording, some other links, how to stay connected. So if you have any questions, you could feel free to reply back to that email. Sarah will be on it, and those are humans behind those emails, so we will see them. Could you include all the books Sarah recommended in the email? Ooh, that's a great idea. Well, I know the habits one, but you'll give me the other ones you mentioned. Cool. Atomic Habits, highly recommended. Yeah. Cool. All right. Anyone else? You can unmute yourself too if you have a question. We have 2 minutes left. Good.
But I love all the thank you notes as well. So
I know, that's always nice to see.
for joining. And it's just so much more fun to have that interaction. So I appreciate everyone's thoughtfulness and sharing their different responses too, since burnout is, it's not a solo thing. We're all feeling it. So the more that we can help one another, just the better that we can all feel. I'm all for it.
Awesome. Great. All right, everyone. Well, we have 1 minute left. But like we said, if you have any questions that come up later on, feel free to reply back and you can ask us there. But thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon, and stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourselves, everything.
All of the things.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sara. This was wonderful. Always a much needed topic. So we appreciate your expertise.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. So thank you, Jill. And thank you again, everyone, and hope to see you next time.
All right. Bye, everyone.